We might all have previously thought Alpine was just one of the average teams in the Formula One lineup, but with the release of their latest car, the whole world might have to rethink that. They were the final team to reveal their 2023 F1 vehicle, the A523, and boy was it an amazing piece of machinery. This technological juggernaut represents a pretty significant shift in Alpine's mindset from last year's machine. In this video, we're going to unpack some of the changes Alpine has made to the A522. Keep in mind that this is the car that they hope will earn them a place at the top. Is this car good enough to give Ferrari and Mercedes a tough time? Keep watching to find out. Alpine's A523 is a considerable advancement over last year's model and has been completely rebodied with a unique design. Among several other major changes, this car has a new front wing, a broader nose, and an all-new pushrod rear suspension. Alpine managed to aggressively meet challenging aerodynamic and weight targets, and the car is now well within the weight restriction. This allows them to place the ballast to meet the demands of individual circuits they would race in throughout the season. A redesigned front wing is suspended from a bigger, flatter nose, which, to be honest, gives the car an imposing appearance on the track. The wing's bottom flap is now linked to the nose rather than hanging from it. This redesigned nose structure allows for more freedom when making adjustments to the front wing parts, according to technical director Matt Harmon. This genius idea would give them more legroom for additional versatility when setting up their cars for different circuits. When looking at the nose of the new car, it's quite obvious that it is broader than the previous model, and the lowest piece of the wing is now fixed to the tip of the car rather than dangling down from it. This, together with the improved anti-dive geometry of the front suspension, should help the driver maintain a more consistent aerodynamic balance throughout the various phases of a corner. The front suspension retains the previous pushrod layout, but the geometry has been modified quite impressively to provide a little more resistance to dip during braking. This is for the sake of the aero platform, which is more crucial than ever with this generation of ground effect car because the car's orientation determines how much incoming air passes over the body and beneath the floor. If this amount of air fluctuates too much during braking and entering the curve, the rear can become unstable, leading to another one of the spectacular crashes we've witnessed in the Formula One. This ground effect would be a big focus for all the teams going into the new season. The adjustment in Alpine's front suspension geometry is actually a strong indicator of how the team went about achieving increased aero benefits. Although last year's car was typically more balanced and consistent than their midfield competitors, it couldn't match the downforce levels recorded by top teams like Ferrari and Red Bull. On the A523, we can see a completely different arrangement of inlets to the floor tunnels, signaling a rethink of the entire underfloor area and how it would handle the airflow. As with almost all the cars we've seen for 2023, the radiator area has been relocated, and Alpine has leveraged this to create smaller side pods with a larger shoulder area. That's not all. The side pod tops now have a deep and classy Ferrari-style trench that channels airflow to the beam wing while keeping it from overflowing over the cockpit sides. Alpine has been confident enough to move away from the very rigid floor and wide body of last year's car, which held the aerodynamic porpoising at bay. Even though this allowed for good control of the vehicle through the front and rear ride heights, Alpine still decided to abandon the wide side pod because they've successfully improved their control of the aero platform. They're not wrong in believing that this improved control was enhanced by the modified nose and wing arrangement we talked about earlier. Alpine is pushing Formula One engineering to new heights, which is why they didn't just stop at the redesign of the nose and wing. The back of the car has also been totally revamped, with the suspension switching from pull rod to pushrod activation. This little but significant change has allowed for a simpler and lighter installation overall. The lower placement of the suspension rockers with a pushrod architecture is most likely responsible for the bodywork being lower towards the rear axle than before. One really interesting thing they've done to secure some extra gains in performance is to improve the reliability of their power unit. Alpine created a reputation for itself in Formula One last season by launching a near-season-long improvement campaign for its A522 chassis. While not holding back on offering as many updates as it could, the French automaker has found room to make even more significant changes for this season's A523. Alpine decided to experiment with an idea that competitors have abandoned by reworking their nose and front wing. If you remember, both Aston Martin and AlphaTauri adopted the elevated nose tip layout last season. While Aston Martin stuck with its version until the end of the season, AlphaTauri had given up when Japanese Grand Prix was around the corner. That's not to say the raised tip solution isn't feasible. Alpine certainly saw possibilities beyond its previous layout, because the new car's alterations require a slightly higher midsection position for the front wing. As always, it boils down to not just how much performance can be found right now, but also how much performance the team can hope to find later on. Alpine's nose runs all the way down to the leading edge of the main plane, instead of it being positioned slightly behind it like its predecessor. Alpine was one of the teams to launch the downwashing ramp side pod solution in 2022. Yet, as time passed, it gradually evolved into something that allowed it to stand apart from the rest of the pack. This move initially concentrated on the hunching of the side pod's back corner, which helped wind from the top to flow down into the Coke bottle region at the back of the car. The crew continued to push this design to the very limits. They excavated the middle piece of the side pod to create more of a gully for the wind to travel down the sloped section towards the rear of the car. This blueprint can be found in several of this year's contenders, as they seek to capitalize on the available aerodynamic benefits. Ahead of this, Alpine has maintained its inlet form, though with a smaller size and a reduction of the square edges. It's also divided the surface of the mirror into 3 portions, similar to what AlphaTauri and Mercedes did last season. As for their cooling, Alpine has shifted to a more centerline-oriented cooling strategy than some of its competitors in recent years. As a result, the design looks a bit more top-heavy than we would like, but the only way to really find out how that would affect performance is when the races begin. To balance things out for 2023, some progress has been made in this area, all of which will result in weight reductions, increased cooling efficiency, and more radical aerodynamic bodywork. They've taken some of the cooling system that might normally be down the center line and have managed to reduce it. The idea behind this is that they want to control some of the mass flow down to the rear of the car. Alpine has made this cooling system smaller, while also managing to reduce the plenum temperature of the engine as well. This was not only an aerodynamic benefit, but also gives a whole lot of crank power to the vehicle. Alpine has taken advantage of the smaller cooling internals by optimizing the bodywork's topology as it searches for more aerodynamic performance from its solution. Meanwhile, Alpine's stacked biplane beam wing, originally seen on the Red Bull and launched during the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, is still in use. This beam wing will be optimized based on the rear wing specifications the FIA announces at a given race weekend. A more traditional design is likely to be preferred in the high downforce locations as it was last season. Now let's talk about the colors of the car. As we all know, the current Alpine was known as Renault until the start of the 2021 F1 season. When Renault was rebranded to Alpine, its livery also changed dramatically. For years, the team had traveled around in a predominantly yellow automobile, which had changed to yellow and black before the famous rebrand. Looking back, the team's most notable livery was introduced in the early 2000s. Renault was seen back then with a blue and yellow car that saw them through 2 constructors and 2 drivers' titles in succession, with Fernando Alonso at the wheel. That famous yellow was replaced with blue in 2021, and then pink was introduced the year after that. In this 2023 season, we'll see Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly race the first 3 Grand Prix with a pink car in collaboration with sponsor BWT. The rest of the season will be driven in the blue automobile with a little touch of pink. The pink livery might as well be their lucky color, as 2022 was their most successful year in a very long time, with Alpine easily overtaking McLaren as the fastest midfield team following the major rule change. The goal now will be to consolidate that position, with Aston Martin expected to join the fight. These teams will hope to reduce the distance to the top 3 teams, Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes. Like most of the teams, Alpine claims that its A523 would be strong enough to earn them a place at the top, and they've planned to install a bunch of upgrades to the car throughout the season. The squad is powered by a Renault engine, which, after experiencing reliability concerns last year, now appears to be as fast as rival power units. Anticipation is now building up for preseason testing, which will take place in Bahrain from February 23rd to 25th, followed by the start of the season on March 5th at the same track as the Bahrain Grand Prix. We can expect nothing but fireworks at the start of the Bahrain Grand Prix. Looking at Alpine's A523 and its modifications, we can be sure that they'll give the other teams a run for their money. Do you think Alpine is finally ready to challenge for the title? Let us know what you think in the comments.